So it was near the end of my eighth grade year. It was a school day, and I woke up and I knew somehow, because I don't think I had a clock in my room, but I knew it was late. I knew my mother hadn't woken me up for school. And I was laying upstairs in bed and the house was quiet. And I just kept thinking, I don't want to make a noise because if my mother hears me moving around, she's going to realize she never sent me off to school and it's going to ruin things. I was afraid that was going to ruin my day. But eventually, I had to piss. So I got up and walked down the hall and went in the bathroom. And when I came out of the bathroom, my father was standing at the top of the steps. Now you might think that's not odd, except at the time my father worked away. He was a office manager for a construction company. And for many years, he was only home on weekends because the jobs were too far away. So the first thing I saw him and I was confused, what's he doing home? And he just looked at me and he said, your brother is dead. And it's like my very first urge, which only lasted half a second, luckily, was to laugh. I thought this is some sort of a weird joke, And then, I was thinking, because I had two brothers, if you've been keeping track of these videos, you'll have seen my brother Rick. And then I had a brother older than Rick, whose name was Jim. And also I had the oldest in the family was Lila, the sister, and the youngest is Barb, the other sister. But anyway, he said, your brother, and for some reason right off I thought, well, Rick can't be dead. I just saw him not long ago. I just saw him last night. And this all went through my head in about, 2 seconds. You know how that happens. And then he said, and his throat was all choked up. This is over 50 years ago, and I'm getting choked up. He said, Jimmy is dead. And then I think he went back downstairs, and I went to my room to get dressed, and I just had no idea what the hell was going on. This just made no sense to me. This would be the first person in my family, first person close to me at all that had died in my life. All my grandparents were dead before I was born. I think my one grandmother was still alive, but I never met her. And there was never anybody else like that even like any friends or anything like that. So that just had my mind twisting. And I got downstairs, and somewhere along the way, over the next days or whatever, hours, minutes, whatever, I learned that Jimmy had gone to a senior party the night before, and he'd taken his car. He'd got a Triumph, a little sports car. I think it was a TR3. It was a little convertible. It was a cool car. Anyway, it was a two-seater. And after the party, and I don't know how much booze any of them had had. But he was giving two of his classmates a ride home. And they wrecked down by, anybody from around here, Midway Curve, down by right there where that gas company is, and before you get to Dunlap's, down there. Anyway, they had wrecked. I think one guy got a broken leg. Another guy, I don't know what kind of injuries he had, but Jim died. And it was a rough couple of days. One of the first things I remember, and one of the things too I remember about that is I was confused. I didn't know how I was supposed to feel, how I was supposed to act. If anybody happens to watch this who's younger and hasn't had this experience, let me just tell you, you feel what you feel, act how you act, say what you say. Everybody's different. There's no supposed to involved. Anyway, but I remember one of the things, I don't know if might have been later that day. I think I was out in the kitchen or something, and I heard my mother in the living room just scream. Now you have to know, both my parents were strong people. They were of that greatest generation that grew up in the Depression. They were both hardworking people that things didn't faze them. And my mother just gave this screech. And I just heard her saying, like, no, no, no. And I don't know if I went there or my father came out to where I was after a bit, and he told me to go over town, that Dr. Gillard had called a prescription in for my mother, and I went over to Fox's drugstore to pick it up. I don't know what it is. I'm guessing, Valium or something along those lines. But could have never imagined seeing my mother hysterical like that. And so then, there was those couple of days, and I can remember other weird thoughts. Like I can remember sitting in the living room and hearing kids walking by on the sidewalk outside, laughing or whatever. And I felt like jumping up and going over and going, "What are you doing? Don't you know this is the death house?" I don't know, just any kind of weird thoughts like that. And so the arrangements were made at Heath's. And I remember, they had a private viewing for the family before they had, any of the public stuff. And I wasn't wild about going, but it was, you had to. I remember one of the things about that also kept going through my mind was just that I didn't believe it was real. And the thing is, at the time, like I said, I was all confused and I wasn't sure, what I was supposed to feel or anything. So I didn't really talk to anybody. I didn't know what was normal. But I just kept remember thinking it's not real. It's not, it's some kind of joke. Yeah, just like all kind of crazy thoughts. Like, oh, he went off to join the CIA or something. I don't know. Anyway, went over to that viewing. And this is something that was really weird for me. When I walked in and saw him laying in the casket, all of a sudden I thought to myself, It's real. I didn't believe it until now. And at the same time, I heard my father say, I never believed it until now. And my mother said to him something like, I knew you wouldn't. I knew you wouldn't. But I don't know how long, like I stood there or whatever. And I maybe went down on the kneeler and said a prayer. I know that's something you generally do. I don't remember if I did or not. Now that I think of it, I kind of have this memory. And I don't know if it's real or not, but I think I actually was on the kneeler next to my sister Lila. And we were praying together. I just thought of another memory I'll get to about Lila after a bit. But so then I was there and I had to escape. I had to go. And I said something like, I'm going. And my dad grabbed my hand. He says, don't go, don't go. And he had tears in his eyes and stuff. Again, something I never would have thought I'd see. And I really I wanted to go home. And my mother said, so it's okay. It's okay. He's just going outside for a bit. So that's what I did. I remember going out. And my one cousin came out. He was an older cousin. And he came out and stood with me for a while and that. And I know that's something I'll always be thankful for, just having them there. See, like I said, 50 years later, I still have trouble. Anyway, I remember when we had the public viewing, and of course, it was like the whole high school showed up. And Jim was one of those guys. He was easygoing and popular, you know. He made friends easy and all that. And of course, you know how that goes too, and something like that, especially in a small town and high school. Even if you don't know the person that well, it affects everybody. Um, and I can remember being at the viewing. I remember there being a couple of kids from my grade coming in, and like my mother said, go over and say hello to them and that, you know, like because really they were coming for me, you know. I mean, I didn't totally understand all these protocols and stuff at the time, but that was kind of nice of them. Anyway, of course, there was the funeral, which the church was packed. But the other thing I was going to say about with Lila, I'd forgotten, but I remember just now talking about it. Now, the Catholic Church, which if you saw my tour video, we zipped by it a little fast, but it has the big front doors, but there's also a side door with a ramp going up to it. And we were walking up that ramp. And it was really weird because I was walking next to Lila. And I just felt like I needed to hold somebody's hand. And all of a sudden I felt her hand in mine. It was like just like sort of like a psychic thing. And we walked up that ramp. And then when we were getting towards the doors, I thought, and of course, this is silly. I was afraid I'd go in and kids my age, I thought it'd be embarrassing. They'd see me holding my sister's hand. You know, stupid things you think of at that age. But as we were getting to the door, she let go of my hand. I always remember it was such a weird thing that it's like she sensed I needed to hold her hand, and she sensed I needed to let it go. For all I know, maybe she needed to hold my hand. You know what I mean? And so, of course, we had the funeral and the burial, and then a bunch of people at the house. back then those things were almost always held at the house. Now a lot of people, at least around here, it'll be like the church basements and that, where they'll have the after funeral thing with the food and all that. But had all that people at the house and people bringing, casseroles and all that. And that was still one of the worst times of my life. And I wish I never would have had to see that happen to my parents. So again, if any youngsters are watching, don't do that to your parents. I mean, you've heard it plenty of times, don't drink and drive. Don't drink stupid, don't drive stupid. Don't, any of that stuff here, don't text and drive, whatever. Don't be in the car goofing around with your friends, which I used to do all the time. Luckily, I didn't put my parents through it a second time. But yeah, that I guess that's mostly all I can think of to say about that. I'm sure, like always, there'll be other things I think of later, but I think this will probably be the most serious video you'll ever see out of me. Peace out.